Is this the best generation of S3? This is the Audi S3, more importantly, the 8L. And I want to find out if this is the best generation of S3. Growing up, I always used to hear first is the worst. But in this case, I really want to find out if that's the case. Because this was Audi's first crack at a hot hatch. That's right. This was their first sort of consumer-based miniature hot hatch with a 4-pot engine. Their first time pairing it with that Quattro system. And obviously rivaling with the likes of the original Focus RS as well as the Subaru Impreza, Audi definitely wanted to see if they could have their slice of that cake. So how have they succeeded? They paired it with their classic 4-pot Haldex all-wheel drive recipe that we see today, except in this it's a bit different. This features the 1.8T, nicknamed the BAM engine for a good reason. They do tend to blow up. However, that's because obviously when people toy around with the power, it kind of does reward you for that. I mean, mapped examples with like this one with a decat downpipe can make 300 horsepower. From an original 225 horsepower, that is definitely a significant increase, especially from, you know, we're talking the year 2000. You know, so to have that level of power is ridiculous. And not to mention, if it does go bang, luckily they're not that expensive to forge, should I say. And as a result, some can even make 500 to 600 horsepower quite commonly. It's ridiculous what this platform can do. Paired with that Haldex all-wheel drive system, this is the first application where you're obviously primarily front-wheel drive, but it will send power to the back when you need it, especially when we've got conditions like today where it's nice and wet and greasy. But this just has no problem at all dealing with it. And we've obviously featured the EA888, a common VAG engine on this channel many times. You know, check out the previous video on the Golf R if you haven't already. And you'll know that engine is very boosty and very strong throughout the rev range. Well, the BAM engine in this, the 1.8T, is no different. You only get a slightly more turbo lag, but it's very much the same in terms of its rev range. Very strong, and once it is on boost, you're just flying down the road. To be fair, that turbo lag kind of adds to the drive. You know, you're just waiting for it to surge, and then you just get thrown back into your seat. And obviously, it helps that this has got Haldex all-wheel drive, because if you want to launch it off the lights, just squabbling at the front, and then it's off like a bullet. It's really, really fun. When they first made this hot hatch, they done it right. They gave us a manual only option. That's right, 6-speed manual box paired with this recipe, and it is brilliant. The fact that you can just roll through the gears and experience that boost. Heel and toe in this is so fun. The box itself is pretty decent. It can be a bit rubbery in terms of when you're throwing between the gears, but once you slot in, you know, it is quite direct. As for the steering, now the steering of this car is hydraulic, so unlike other S3s where you get electronic, but in typical Audi fashion, you still don't get that much feel. It is a little bit numb, but it is nicely heavily weighted as well. So again, there is just that element of it does feel a bit more raw compared to other Audi S3s. And for that reason, I definitely do favor it. There's just something quite Quattro, quite rally car. At the end of the day, Audis, you look at them, you know, you think of the original S1, for example, you know, their Quattro rally car. Whilst this might not have the 5-pot, it still feels like a thoroughbred rally car, especially on these little back roads. Now, in terms of suspension and steering, when you're pressing on, you know, the S3, it is a bit crashy. I will say this, obviously this is on coilover, but it's still quite sort of softly sprung, so it's still quite comfortable. And it's definitely not a flat corner kind of car, definitely not. You know, there's a lot of body roll, but that kind of helps you in a way. Obviously, you've got your hydraulic steering, and there's not much feedback, you know, in typical Audi fashion, you know. So don't think, oh, because this is, you know, the first gen, you know, you've got tons of steering feedback. You still haven't got that much feedback. Don't get me wrong, it's nicely weighted and nice and heavy and whatnot, but yeah, it's not talking that much to you. What is the chassis. You know, you can definitely feel a lot of movement in your arse, for example, but that helps you kind of place the car and kind of lets you know what it's doing mid-corner. One thing I love that this car does, you know, obviously this is the first application of Haldex, but in this it just feels really mechanical. You can really feel the front axle just digging away into the tarmac and just giving you the best possible traction whatsoever. It does push on a bit wide, a bit of understeer, but then that rear axle is there to help you out and just tidy it all up, you know? So it's an assisted drive, of course, but you still feel quite involved, and that's what's important. I feel like the later generations, you are kind of robbed of that. Oh yeah, the brakes are really good as well. There's not much pedal fuel, but they've been strong all day long. No fade whatsoever, really good performance. In terms of movement in the chassis, in terms of sideways stuff, well, you know, you can't necessarily do lift-off oversteer with this. I mean, I know I said it's under 1,500 kilos, but it's still quite heavy for its size. You know, bear in mind, this is a very small car, and yet, you know, you can't exactly just lift off the throttle and really trail your line. Instead, you kind of have to be quite harsh with the brakes, really transfer that weight, and then you might get movement. But one thing that's helped is the fact that not only have they given us a manual gearbox, but they've also given us a manual handbrake. So you can get a bit of action like that. And that's kind of what helps to give it that thoroughbred quattro rally car feeling. And again, I just feel like the later generations of S3s are missing that. And I like the fact that it doesn't take up the whole space of the road. It's nice and short and stubby. You still get those flared haunches, but you know, it's very easy to place on the roads. And that's exactly what you need. Why are hot hatches nowadays, you know, it's almost like they're super saloons sometimes. I mean, look how big the Honda Civic FL5 is, for example, compared to this, you know, or the S3 saloon. This is definitely what a hot hatch is meant to be. I get it. It's a hot hatch, you know, it's 3 doors, it's short and stubby, it looks quite silly, it looks quite immature, but this definitely has got that boy racer DNA. Kind of what's missing from these modern day hot hatches. You guys gotta remember, the S3AL, you know, it's literally a 25-year-old car. And to think it's become this old now, you know, really has aged quite well. You know, really very nice haunchy looks as well. You know, it does definitely look retro. You know, I'm not saying it looks modern and fresh, but on the flip side, it looks quite retro, quite cool, especially because of its short, sort of stubby 3-door body. And then you've got, you know, the interior, for example. Yes, it's old in here, but because they haven't sort of gone all wacky and anything like that, it's still quite ergonomical. It's still quite sort of back to basics, but in a good way. You know, the quality is quite good, and you can, you know, spruce things up. You know, Apple CarPlay screen, for example. So this is definitely a cabin and a car that I can definitely live with, despite being 25 years old. It still could be quite a decent daily. That being said, obviously, what's it like to run? You know, around town with a bit of dual carriageway, you could probably get about 30 miles per gallon in this. You know, it's not too thirsty to run. And in terms of reliability, now I obviously mentioned, you know, I made the BAM joke and whatnot, but to be fair, if kept kind of standard or just sort of low boost, you know, these aren't too bad. I've seen them at moon mileage. They seem to be fairly reliable. And then you've got the price. I mean, this one, with its host of modifications, you know, coilovers, you know, your decat downpipe, your map, you know, and your PS5s, and this whole package that you get for less than $3,000. You know, that's amazing. So, you know, you really do kind of get a hard bargain with these cars. Just the question is, which one do you have? You know, do you go for the 8P or do you go for this? Personally, I think this is more fun than the 8P. Talking about S3s here, but at the same time, one natural competitor that comes to mind is the Mark V Golf GTI. You know, similarly priced, but here you get obviously all-wheel drive compared to front-wheel drive. You know, but then the power level is important. At 225 or a Mac example like this at 300, you know, this is literally the perfect balance where you might get a squabble of wheel spin and then you get that all-drive sort of hook into the road. And then the same can be said for front-wheel drive. You'll get a decent amount of wheel spin, but it will hook up. 300 horsepower really is the limit for front-wheel drive. So, yeah, which one is more fun? It's a tough one. One thing I really like about the S3, and I think this generation gets it bang on, you know, you really get that sort of perfect balance between sort of understated and kind of sleeperish. At the same time, it's got all the right hints that this is a special model. You know, you've got these lovely Recaros that hold you in. You know, you've got these lovely little styling cues like the silver mirrors, this kind of haunch arches as well. And I feel like later generations, they kind of either do too much or they do too little. Like for example, in the 8P, I know you just get these normal seats, and that car is really more of a blenders compared to this. This, I think, gets the balance perfect. At the end of the day, you're still driving something that can make remarkable progress. So you'd want some cues to at least show that. So overall, the S3 AL is definitely a wicked hot hatch. Audi certainly did things right when they did their first attempt at the hot hatch. Question is, was it their best attempt? I guess we're gonna have to get the other S3s on the channel to really find out. If you guys enjoyed these reviews, please subscribe and please follow. Please share them around. It helps the channel massively. Comment down below what cars you want to see. Don't forget, this very car is for sale, so do message me if you are interested. Like I said, under 3 grand for all this. It's definitely a hard bargain. But yeah, I'm now going to enjoy it a little bit. For now, I'm in Carmadnab.